Okay, today's webinar is What is DITA? And our presenter is Rafi Pryntz-Nadworny. Rafi, it's all yours.
Thank you so much. All right, hello and welcome everyone to the What is DITA webinar. If you're looking for fashion icon and burlesque performer DITA Von Teese, you're in the wrong place. This is a webinar for everyone who's heard of the term DITA or wants to further their career in technical writing. Now, before we start, I just want to take a quick poll to see where people's knowledge of DITA is. So you should be getting a list of questions from I have a good grasp, bits and pieces, no, and I've mastered the topic, but I'm interested to learn more. So we'll let people trickle in and answer this question. Right now, I'm in cloudy Rochester, New York. The temperature is a bit cold and it's extremely damp. So bear in mind, I might have to mute myself a little bit to blow my nose or something. All right, Mary says, stay warm. Thank you so much, Mary. All right, we're getting some polls in progress. It looks like we're at 89%, so that's a considerable achievement. And we'll just leave it up for 6 more seconds to see if we get a bit more answers. Here they come in. We're at 91%. This is great. All right, that's good enough to get a gist. I'm going to close off the polls now, and let's see what we have. So it looks like 13% have a good grasp of it, but not the whole picture. We have most of you, 70%, which bits and pieces, and then 18% have no idea, and then only 2% that they've mastered the topic, but they're interested in learning more about DITA. So this is a good starting place because this webinar will go into great detail about all the different terms and concepts related to DITA. All right, let's see. I'm going to hide the results here, and let's get started. So a little bit about myself. My name, again, is Rafi Pryntz-Nadworny, and I work at Jorsec as the Marketing Operations Manager. I've been there for about 3.5 years, and I love it. So as a marketer, I'm fascinated with content and the content metrics that are used to measure the kind of achievements in marketing that we're obligated to prove. Now, in technical writing, there's a whole new realm of content metrics that need to be developed in order for technical writers to prove what they do to the rest of the company and to show their value. So I've been pretty interested over the past couple of years, and I did a webinar with the STC, ooh, gosh, it has to be, I think, 1.5 years ago, regarding this topic. So while my role is not a technical writer, I have worked alongside technical writers for almost 4 years now, and you know, it's exciting information. So a little bit about my company. Jorsec is the makers of EasyDITA, is a component content management system. As everything from collaborative authoring, single source content management, and multi-channel publishing. So enough about that. Let's get started. Here's an outline of what we'll be covering today. Feel free to sleep through any of the boring parts. I'm just kidding. It's all really super exciting stuff. This is everything that I wish someone had told me when I started almost 4 years ago. So we'll begin going over the common terms and concepts that are associated with DITA: structured content, semantic tagging, the definition of DITA, the benefits of DITA, DITA itself, the topic types, reuse, and publications. So I will leave some time at the end for questions, so hopefully it won't take too much time to go through these. Okay, so a lot of webinars start off with DITA is an XML standard. That's it. Congratulations, you don't need to watch the rest of the webinar. But I wanted to start off, in all seriousness, with why we want to know what DITA is in the first place. And it all comes down to this. It's pretty easy for humans to read and communicate and understand languages that we've developed over the millennia, but not so much for machines. Remember, at the very core level, robots and computers communicate in ones and zeros. There's been a major push to develop languages that allow us humans and machines to easily understand each other so that we can use machines to improve our daily lives. I want you to think about all the latest trends and technologies that are coming about that require computers to understand and use content in ways never before required. You have chatbots that are required to know the complexity of conversations and respond in context of the dialogues that they have. You have augmented reality that requires computers to recognize their surroundings and display relevant and concise information to the user. So how do we get machines to understand what we want them to do with our content? We do it by adding additional structure to the content so machines understand what we're trying to say. DITA, in a nutshell, is one of these structured languages humans have developed to advance the ways computers can interpret and use content. So I know the term structured content gets thrown around a lot, and it's used pretty loosely, but most of us already create some semblance of structured content. We have chapters in books, recipes, step-by-step instructions, FAQs, privacy statement, email signatures, and so on, each with a common formatting, type of information, and related context. By writing content in consistent forms, it's easy for us to understand at a glance. Think about a stop sign. If every stop sign was a different shape and color, it would be really hard to know where to stop without looking closely at your surroundings at each and every crossroad. With standardization of these kinds of content, it makes it easy for us to understand. Now let's look at an example. Traditionally, structured content meant databases and spreadsheet, and text was quote unquote unstructured. But the text we create has structure. It's just harder to translate into the ones and zeros that machines use. We often indicate the difference in text visually in discerning ways, such as the titles being bigger, short descriptions are italicized, more important terms are in bold, and so on. As humans, it's easy for us to see and interpret these visual differences, but not so much machines because they can't associate the meaning behind the styling. Here we have one of my favorite poems by Joyce Kilmer. I think I'll never see a poem as lovely as a tree. The title's larger than anything else. The poem is written in italics, and the author is indicated in bold and comes at the very end of the paragraph. This is where it gets exciting. Here you can see that we've added structured bits of code to the content to help the computer identify what each of these elements represents. These bits of code add semantic meaning to the text in a way that computers can be programmed to interpret. We have title tags around the title. The poem is labeled as a poem. The date is separated as a date. And once these tags are added, it's easy for machines to be programmed to use the content like data instead of being one gigantic block of unstructured quote unquote text. These bits of code are called semantic tags, which is one of the common terms used to describe what data is. It's a semantic markup language. So tag, you're it. With tags, there's typically an open tag and closing tag, leaving the content sandwiched in between. This moves the task from trying to get a computer to understand the complexity of linguistic rules to just understanding how to interpret the tags themselves. Think about it this way. When you go to a grocery store, there's tags on the produce that explain the price and information about that product. Is it organic? What's the expiration date? Is it cheaper if I buy 2 of them? And so on. Now, it's not just text, but images, videos, and other types of mediums can be tagged using the same methods. As long as there's tags, computers can look at the tags and know what to do with it. Here we've identified a ball, a book, and a human. However, the problem arises when we try to agree on what to call each one of these objects. What one person might see as a ball, another might label as a circle, as a book as pages, a human as the cowboy. This could quickly spiral out of hand if everyone can't agree on the same terms. What I could call a ball, you could call a ring, a hoop, a wheel, a sphere, a globe, a disc, a hoop, a halo, or an orb. Which brings us to the need for standardization of these tags. One of the early coding languages for this very purpose of standardizing tags was SGML, which stood for Standardized General Markup Language. Go figure. Of course, needs evolved from the 1960s when SGML was first created, so there's been variations of the original language. You should recognize HTML as it's the standard tags for the web, and there's XML, which is also very common for web application, but has much broader use cases. There's actually more than over 250 different variations of XML standards and growing. Both HTML and XML led into further variations like CSS to style HTML. For XML, there's over hundreds of standards like DocBook, journal authoring tag suites, and Prism, publishing requirements for industry standard metadata. Now, these particular standards are all for technical publication. DITA is one of these popular technical publication standards. All right, to recap, we know why we care about DITA because it serves as a human-machine readable language, and it allows us to create new technology. And it standardizes the semantic tags, so we use the same terms when describing our content. But what does DITA actually represent? It stands for Darwin Information Type Architecture. So in a nutshell, Darwin means higher hereditary attributes. Information represents data, content, and knowledge. Typing is a classification of information. And architecture, which is the hierarchy of elements. All right, so let's look at what Darwin means in the context of DITA. At a high level, every semantic tag we write is taken into context of the larger elements of content. To make sure that people are on the same page, a DITA element is something that we've semantically tagged, like the picture of a ball or a poem of text. Let me use an example. Say we're writing about toast. Personally, there's nothing better in the morning than some sliced bread toasted to perfection with a bit of jam or butter on top. We start by creating a document with the topic of toast. We add information on how to create toast by using a toaster and what you will need in order to accomplish a task such as bread and butter. Now, as humans, we could easily make the connection from these prerequisites and tasks as related to the overall topic of toast. In DITA, many of these elements have hereditary information. Almost like humans have DNA, DITA elements have their parent elements within their tags, so machines understand that it's not just a prerequisite, it's a prerequisite for the topic of toast. Now, if you were to publish this and the computer didn't understand what a prerequisite was, it would know that the text in the prerequisite was part of the topic of toast and treat it just like the topic. The same goes for any elements that we put inside the task or prerequisites. For example, making sure that they don't grab the toaster cord with a wet hand within a note. The note would be taken in context with the prerequisite. Again, if the computer didn't understand what a note was, it would treat it the same as a prerequisite, and then it would roll up to the topic. The same hereditary attributes apply if we were going to create a course syllabus instead. The prerequisite for the course would be recognized as a course prerequisite and not a toaster topic prerequisite. All right, enough about Darwin. The next up, we have I for information. If you really want to debate about it, information is everywhere, but hopefully I won't need to go in too much in detail for what information stands for in this webinar. But to be brief, it's the content of text, sentences, images, videos that we create on a daily basis. Next up, we have the T for typing. Now, typing is not the process for writing on the keyboard, but the process of classifying information. Everything in DITA is separated into topics. instead of storing them into one document. Each of these topic containers, if you will, of information has a very specific purpose. The biggest difference between DITA and what people are accustomed to when writing book-oriented or narrative content is because DITA has everything as discrete pieces of information. Now, in order for us to break down our current topics into these topic types, or documents into these topic types, there's some guidelines that we have to follow to make sure that the information is still coherent. Number one, a topic should answer a single question or subject. It shouldn't try to cover a multitude of ideas or answer multiple questions. Number two, there should be sufficient information for the topic to stand alone or be what's commonly referred to as self-contained. What this means is that you have enough information to describe what the specific topic is for, but not that the topic explains everything related to it. This is commonly referred to as minimalist writing. An example for this is if we were to include information about all the great recipes for toast in a step-by-step instructions on how to use a toaster. It's no bueno. Number three, each topic should have discrete units of information. That means it shouldn't rely on information before or after the topic to explain what it is. I know this is just high-level concepts, so let's look at very specific examples of the basic building blocks of DITA, these topic types. Now, everything in DITA stems from the basic topic type called a topic. There's three common customizations of this basic building block: concept, tasks, and references. The concept topic presents essential conceptual or descriptive information so the reader can understand the background and context of a subject. Task topics provide procedural information on how to do something. Reference topics provide detailed facts or specifications, often in the form of a table or a bulleted list. Let's take a look at some examples. Going back to our toaster scenario, here we have a product description of the Lightning Toaster. It has a title, short description, and a main body of text. The Lightning Toaster comes with a timer dial and bagel mode. Have a perfect slice of delight with your favorite jam or butter. Easily achieve exquisite toasted bread with just a push of a button. There's the marketer in me. Anyways, it looks like the short description is italicized and the title is bigger than the rest of the text, but let's look at the back end and see what is happening as far as what computers can read. Here we can see the semantic tags are added telling the computer what each of these elements of text represents. We have a title tag, a short description, and a body tag. I also want to highlight the con body or the concept body. This is a great illustration of the hereditary attributes of DITA. Now notice this. Nowhere in this concept is anything about styling because there isn't any applied to the raw text. Styling is applied when it gets published, which means as a content creator, we could focus on just producing the content. I did a survey a couple years ago with the SDC that I mentioned, and I found out the average respondent of this survey spends about 4.5 hours a week formatting content and considered it one of the least valuable tasks they could be spending their time on. Now, formatting is really important. It's how we easily understand and scan text. Think about the stop sign example that I mentioned earlier. If each and every stop sign was a unique color and shade and text and font size, sans serif, New Times, New Roman, it would be really hard to understand each and every time you came to a crossroad. So what DITA allows us to do is separate the process of authoring and formatting so we can focus at one at a time. The second building block is a task topic. Here we have instructions on how to clean a toaster. We can see the title, the short description, we have prerequisites, and we have steps and expected results. And we have within the prerequisite a note. Before using the toaster, read the safety warnings. These are just some of the elements that you could add. For a full list, you could go to the OASIS website for standard for DITA. OASIS is the organization for the advancement of structured information standards. There's a link in the resource section of this webinar, so don't worry about Googling it while we're talking. Again, it's easy to understand and read this product description on how to clean a toaster because this task topic is structured in a very similar way to the concept topic. The short description is italicized and the title is bigger than the rest, and the prominent text are in bold. When we look at the back end, again, there's no styling, just semantic tags that make up the DITA elements. We have the title tag, short description, and the hereditary DITA effect, where the body text is now a task body instead of a concept body. We can see that the note is sandwiched in between the prerequisite tags and that the task body is enclosing both. If the note was missing, or the computer didn't understand what a note was, the text would be treated with a higher semantic tag, in this case, a P for general paragraph. So why do we need all this granularity? One of the benefits of DITA is that if we're reviewing our DITA content, it's so much easier to tell when something's missing because we could do a search for all empty short descriptions rather than all italicized text. The third basic building block of DITA, and keep in mind DITA is just a standard of XML, which means that there's other ways of labeling and tagging this information, all within the standard of XML. Sorry, there was a question that just popped up. I wanted to make sure we got it before they stay on the rest of the webinar. You're welcome. All right, so the third basic topic type is a reference topic. Here we have some product specifications for a toaster. We know that it's class A, it has the capability of toasting 1 to 2 slices, and it's for non-commercial use. Now, it's not just blocks of text or lists that we could label with semantic tags, we could also do it with tables. Looking at the back end, we have a table properties such as value and description. It gets pretty granular as far as the information we could tag, which allows us to control exactly how we want to use and render these elements when publishing. Again, if we look at the property head tag, you can see they are passed down to the child element tags for property type, value, and description header tags. Additional granularity can be added via specialization of DITA. Remember that it's just one part of XML. But remember, the whole reason to use DITA and the reason it exists in the first place is to standardize the way that we tag content. Okay, so back on track, we have the last letter of DITA. We're almost there. A for architecture. Now that we took our documents and broke them down into topic types, what do we do now? We need some way of connecting the topics back together when we want to build manuals or other kinds of publications. This is done by using DITA maps. DITA maps are like table of contents. They link all the bits of information that can be contained in one publication. Think of DITA maps like paper binders that allow you to insert, reorder, or remove pages simply by snapping open the clasps. Unlike paper binders, DITA allows you to reuse the same topic in multiple locations. I'll get into how that exactly works later in this presentation. Here we can see the same topic types are used in both manuals or both DITA maps. All right, so let's take a break from all the nitty-gritty and look at the benefits on why we want to use DITA. First off is the benefit of content management. We've taken a large number of quote-unquote unstructured text documents and we've broken them down into little pieces of content so we know at a granular level what kind of content we have. We can easily do searches for any kind of information or elements like missing steps, short descriptions, or even titles. This allows us to make very consistent documents and to quality control when working in large teams. You may also notice that all these topics stem from a single structured topic. DITA promotes consistency across large teams because of the inherent structure. Now, just like it would be time consuming to try to write web pages from scratch, manually entering the code as text, people have built web content management systems that makes it easy for people to create websites. The same thing goes for managing data content. These systems are called component content management systems, and they make data content management easier for non-programmers in a similar way by providing visual interfaces and automation for creating and editing data content. Sorry, it's getting a little chilly in here. Next up, we have the benefit of faster workflows. It feels like with every passing year, our customers are getting more and more demanding and less patient waiting for information. Who's going to wait 2 weeks to get a brochure in the mail that describes what their product does? No one. They want to get the information now, and they want to have available on every device that they have and personalized for them. In DITA, since everything is broken down into the self-contained topics, people can work on all the different parts simultaneously without waiting on the rest of the team. This means that documents can be developed and released much more quickly, aligning to the agile methodologies that many companies are starting to use. I mentioned this before, but styling and formatting is separate from DITA content. This allows DITA content to be automatically styled when it's published to many different media formats and devices with just a push of a button. Multiple studies have shown separating and automating formatting can reduce the cost of publication from anywhere from 30 to 50%. Another aspect is because content has been semantically tagged, it's much more future-proof, since you can change the publishing configurations without touching the raw content itself. Here's a big one. Many companies move to DITA just for the reuse benefits. And just in a few slides, I'll describe exactly how reuse works and how you could apply it to your own DITA content. But just know that it can save you a lot of money and time with reuse if you have a lot of overlapping content, whether it's multiple products that are similar, multiple audiences, or publications that have overlapping or similar content. Next up, interoperability and scalability of your content. DITA is an open standard, which means that content created in DITA can be transformed into other systems without a complex or costly conversion process. Everyone can look up the tags that are used in DITA. If you use a proprietary tagging standard, if someone had developed their own standard of XML that was, personalized just for that company, then the tags would be hidden from public knowledge and make it really difficult for any other organization or team to use your content. With DITA broken down into little topic types, you can send the translator the individual topics that haven't been translated yet, instead of submitting entire publications over and over again, which reduces the translation cost. All right, so enough about the benefits. Let's get into how we actually reuse in DITA. I know I've been building it up for some time, so let's get started. Reuse is a smart way reuse is a smart content methodology that allows you to write content just once and reuse it everywhere else. Reuse works by creating content in one central location and then linking that content everywhere else that you want the content referenced. Think about writing a paragraph on a piece of paper and then holding it up in front of a mirror. Any changes you make to the paper are reflected in that mirror. Reuse works in somewhat a similar fashion. You can see the content in the mirror, but it's only a visual reference to the original content. Of course, in the real world, your text would be backwards in the mirror, so it's not a perfect analogy. Okay, so we're just covering 3 basic reuse types in DITA. This webinar is designed just to give you a taste of how reuse works, but there's other webinars out there that go into much more detail than I will have time for today. The first method that we'll be using is reusing entire topics. So first thing first, we need to write the topics within our repository. Here we created some topics about safety, installation, maintenance, and troubleshooting. We get word from our managers on high that we have to create a manual for our maintenance crew. So we need to create a DITA map and add relevant topics to it. So we need to have some introduction, the maintenance information, and any troubleshooting information that they might need. And so it's pretty easy because we have developed these topics to create this map, and we deliver it to our manager. So within a couple of weeks, they're so impressed that they asked us to immediately start the next task, which is to create another manual, this time for our internal engineers. So we create a new map called the engineering manual. We happen to know that these maps share some similarities because it's the same product. Only thing different is the audience. So we can reuse the same content. We pull the same topics from our content library into the engineering map. Now we've hit reuse gold. The original content is in our content library, but it's referenced in both manuals. We can't just stop here because the engineering team needs more information to do their job. Now, the engineers also need to know about safety, installation, and operation instructions, so we could add those too. You could see how easily, once the topics are created, it is to put together manuals and other publications, as well as it is to reuse existing information. Mark Baker wrote a book called DITA Metrics, Saving Trends with Reusable Master Topics. It's also linked in the resource section of this webinar. Mark learned that using reusable topics, you could drastically reduce the overall cost and time spent creating content. For example, with just 3 products, you could save 40% of your time writing the task type topics alone. With 4 products, 49%, and with 5 products, 54%. This is a trend for task topics only, when content inside the topics is similar between products, not identical. Now, you're probably thinking, how do I reuse safely? There's 2 main scenarios when it comes to reusing entire topics. The first is where the topics is identical from the different audiences, or is where topics are identical for different audiences, products, or publication types. A good example of this is content that contains copyright information that's required for you to provide your product or services. Reuse is also possible with entire topics when the content is identical with some exceptions. For example, different product names, product specifications like dimensions or properties, you can still reuse the topics by applying other reuse mechanisms to make sure that the right product name or information appears in the right product. That reuse type is a little too advanced for this webinar, so we won't go into it today, but know that it is possible with some slight variations to reuse whole topics. Okay, so in DITA, you could also reuse groups of topics. You can do so by adding maps within other maps. So let's take our maintenance manual that we previously created. It contains a bunch of topics such as the introduction, maintenance, and troubleshooting. Our legal department has just reviewed the maintenance manual and recommended that we add a number of topics to meet our legal and service requirements. Now, because this legal requirements applies to all deliverables that we create, we need to make sure that it's added to all other product manuals. So we could manually add each and every one of these legal topics to each and every one of the maps that we have, but this would be really time consuming. Instead, we're going to put the legal topics in their own map and reuse that inside all the other maps for our products. As a result, inside the maintenance manual, we have the legal information map. Now, we've saved time in 2 ways. First, as an organization, we've written and reviewed our legal topics just once, and they can be reused in multiple maps. If there's any update, the update is applied to each and every other place that the topics and maps is reused. And secondly, we've saved time because we didn't have to manually add individual topics to each and every DITA map. We just needed to reuse the legal map. What's more, you could go one step further. If you're using a component content management system, you could create map templates that already come with the default topics or maps so that whenever you create a new map, all the required maps or topics are in the right place and already created. It sounds good, too good to be true, right? Now, this best practice is not part of DITA as itself. This is called spaghetti reuse. When you simply reuse topics from different maps without any thought on where they're coming from or where they're used, it gets a big mess. This defeats the benefits of having all the content in a single place to manage and to update. Whenever you have content that's reusable, separate it into its own folder so it's easy to find when you need to update something that's reused. Now, apart from reusing entire topics and groups of topics, you could also reuse parts of topics. This is possible thanks to the reuse type called content references, or shortened to conref in many of the industry talks. I mentioned before that keeping separate folder for your topics is a good practice, but you should also do the same when you're reusing parts of topics. All the reusable topic content paragraphs should be kept in a single topic. Let's call it a topic warehouse for the sake of clarity, but in reality, it's just a regular topic type with reusable paragraphs. Now, this warehouse topic is the single source of truth for all reused content because it contains the original text. All right, so what you see here is a task topic steps that are used for most of our toasters, going back to that toast example. You can tell I might have skipped breakfast this morning. So we get orders from our managers that we have to create instructions for two of our products of toasters, the Lightning and the Classic toaster. So we need to create two task topics for each of the toaster models, and because we know that the process for toasting bread is the same for both models, we get to reuse the steps. So we create content references or conrefs in each one of these task topics, and we link them to the centralized warehouse where we store all our reusable content related to toasters. And presto changeo, the steps are now referenced or reflected using the mirror analogy into our new topics. Now, instead of using links, we could have just copied and pasted the information from the warehouse, but this would have been throwing away time and energy that we already spent creating content for reuse. Because once the content is updated, we and our coworkers will still have to search for all the duplicate content and update it manually because it'll be out of date. So let's say that engineering has retrofitted our product, and now they have buttons on the latest models. The steps get updated using the content reference, so when you change the original source, it's automatically applied everywhere else it's reused. Now, just to give you an idea on how we can impact your effectiveness, let me throw a few statistics. Please note that these numbers are only for conref content references. No other reuse types is taken into account. Based on the calculation of Mark Lewis and his white paper DITA called DITA Metrics, Reviewing Strategies and Saving Trends with Warehouse Topics, which is also linked in the webinar slides, it becomes clear that using part of topic content references alone inside, using parts of topics content references alone inside multiple similar products, you could save about 50% of your time. So introducing content references for one product takes 50% more of time than it would be writing the topic without content references. However, when you have two products, you could save 11% of your time due to that reused content when creating the second topic. With three products, it's at 32%. And with the fifth product, it's almost half the time it took you to write the first one. Now, these numbers will obviously vary depending on the nature of your content and could be higher or lower. This is just to give you an idea on how much time you could potentially save with content references or conrefs alone. So we covered over how to create DITA topics and how DITA elements within topics work and how to connect topics using maps. Also how to reuse maps, topics, and parts of topics. Next, we're going to talk about how to publish content. Because there's no styling applied to the raw text, All formatting is done through a publishing engine. Writers develop rules on how they want to display each and every DITA element that they create. Once they set up the rules, they create scenarios for each type of publication format that they want to produce. Let's look at a very simplistic version of these rules, what these rules could look like. Let's say we're tasked by management to deliver our content to PDF, web, and mobile devices. For PDF, we know that they're going to be printed, so we have larger font sizes because they can't change the screen. However, we know that people are viewing the same content on web and on their phone, so we want to reduce the font sizes so they fit for the smaller screen size. Now, it's not just about the devices or the formats. You could also create publishing scenarios for different audiences or versions of content. We do this by adding even more semantic tags to our content to identify the audience type. So when we publish to specific audiences, only the relevant content is actually shown. This makes it easy for us to manage multiple variations of content within a single map or topic without needing to create duplicates. Here's the kicker. Once you've set up these rules and scenarios to format content, the whole process can be automated, which means that if you have a style guide, it's finally enforceable since all your content will be published consistently. Obviously, you need to keep track of changes to the rules and scenarios, and there might be new elements that you haven't accounted for. So I've used the term publishing for creating deliverables, but you could also publish to other technologies and software. For example, you could publish content to chatbots since they require granular content pieces. So we've covered most of what you need to know about how to get started with DITA. Let's talk about how you could apply DITA to your own current content. First, look at your content and see if there's some consistency within the types of documents that you write. If there is, you can start identifying which parts you can classify into the basic building blocks called DITA topic types. Second, if you have a lot of similarities between products, audiences, or versions, or even publications, try to find out where the content overlaps and see how you could centralize those reusable bits to make it easier to find and update. Third, do you have consistent styles? Do you agree on the styles? Do you have the same styles for multiple meanings? If you have consistent styles, start thinking about the rules that you could create to publish the content across different mediums. Fourth, is there a driver like improving customer communication with chatbots, globalization, or simply managing content at a much larger volume? If there is, start thinking about how you could change your content from an asset into a revenue stream for your company. How you can leverage your existing content in new ways if you control every element of it at a large scale. Remember the drivers at the beginning of the webinar? These are just some of the possibilities your organization could be moving towards in the next few years. And using DITA puts you in the position to implement these technologies sooner rather than later. All right. So here are some of the resources that you could use to further your education. I know the SDC has a lot of great resources already, so I won't mention those in this webinar, but there's also learningdita.com, which has supplemental free courses on DITA. There's the Oasis Standard website, which I mentioned before, which has all the list of DITA elements that you could potentially use. And of course, we publish articles monthly on different various topics about DITA. Here's the resources I also mentioned during the webinar if you're curious about where the statistics I got and I referenced, as well as more information about if you're doing localization or reuse. Now, last but not least, the STC is hosting another webinar in a month with my colleague John Baker, who will be doing a webinar on the business implications of DITA and how to evaluate DITA for your organization to see if the benefits outweigh the investment. Now, I might be biased, but this is a great webinar to attend if you want to learn how to build a business case to advance your content, your department, and your career. You've been a lovely audience, so I'd like to take some time for any questions that might have been thought of during this webinar. Thank you so much.
One question from Lauren Conrad. I'm still confused on what the difference is between XML and DITA. They're not the same thing, are they?
So DITA, let me pop back up to that slide right here so we can look at it. Here we go. So DITA is one of the XML standards out there. So DITA is part of XML, and it just contains fewer tags than the entire language of XML. So you could think about a abbreviated version of English or another language. So.
Okay, yeah, she already specified that you answered it already.
All right, perfect.
Another question, what is the type of tool that you use to create the maps?
The tool. So there are many different tools that you could use. So just like I referenced that with web content, there's WYSIWYG editors that allow you to drag and drop web pages and to create content blocks. The same tools can be applied to DITA. So there's component content management systems which work in the same way. They have visual editors that allow you to create new topics, to drag and drop into maps, and to reorder the maps. There's also text editors which allow you to do it via writing in text, similar how they used to create websites by writing it out. Let's see here. I don't think I put it in the resources. There are a lot of different, now we provide free trials, and I know a lot of the other CCMSs out there provide free trials. So if you're interested in getting your hands dirty, you can do that. I can't think of any off the top of my head that are free. So hopefully that answers your question.
Another question that came in is DITA used mostly in technical writing because it's best suited to technical content, or because technical industries are more likely to explore automation in code compared to other publishing genres, for example, book publishing, journalism, content marketing?
Oh, that's a good question. So I come from marketing, and so DITA is one of the standards related to technical publication. So there's over 250 different kinds of XML standards, each with their own kinds of content. So there's various versions of XML. So there could be XML for marketing, there could be XML for accounting, finance, human resources, any given industry. But DITA was created for technical publication in particular. And technical publication works really well because oftentimes there's very structured information. With marketing, it could be, a very loose blog post that don't really have much of a formatting, or very graphical information that varies from every single publication. So it doesn't really fit into contained structures like DITA. But things like writing steps and tasks and concepts and concise bits of information that's consistent across all your content works well for DITA because it's easier to recognize and read, and also to reuse. All right.
The next question, who sets the DITA standard? Is it updated regularly?
Okay, so the DITA standard is created, let's see here, boom. Yes, so the OASIS creates and monitors the DITA standard. So DITA was actually, let's see, I want to get this right. I want to say Microsoft came up with it. So it was originally created by Microsoft, and don't quote me if I'm wrong. And so Microsoft realized that this would be much more helpful for them and the rest of the industries if they publicized it. So they handed it over to the OASIS committee, and they manage it from there on out. So I believe we're already at DITA 1.3, but you could find the 1.2 elements listed in the link for this webinar. All right, IBM, thank you so much. This is why I should have it on my slide notes.
The next question, what are the types of document authoring tools used to create DITA content?
Okay, so there are content component management systems, then there's desktop publishing tools, and then there's a third one, XML authoring systems. So XML authoring systems could not only just edit DITA content, but XML in general. The component content management systems usually stick to a very specific standard, whether it's DITA or one of the other technical publication standards. So And then there's text editors where you could simply, open a text document and type out DITA. All right.
Those are all the questions that I'm seeing that came in.
Perfect. So you've been a lovely audience.
Oh, we have one more.
One more.
Sorry,
Okay,
we have one more. How do you assess the cost of investing in DITA?
Okay, so that is a great question for the next webinar that we'll be doing in a month. So this is going to go into all details about the business aspects of DITA and how you could look at it from a cost perspective or a revenue perspective and see if it fits for your organization. So I know on our own website, we have a short brochure. It's just like 3 pages long. And on the back of that brochure is a checklist to evaluate whether or not your content or organizational needs. So it's what is DITA brochure on our site. I think I could get the STC to post that in the comments section for this webinar afterwards. All right. Any other questions?
Those are all the ones that I saw.
All right, perfect. I just want to follow up with one last poll. As a organization, we're working very hard to advance technical writers in their careers, companies, departments, and organizations. So a lot of the content that we produce is driven to make sure that you are successful at your jobs and your departments are successful at growing your company. So we'd be happy if you're interested in getting more information. We obviously don't want to send you any information that you're not interested in. So, and I won't be offended if you say no. I totally understand we get way too many emails as it is. All right, it looks like we have 82% of the votes, which is still a great number to have. All right, that looks about 97 of the votes, 98. Ooh, we're up there, and 100%. Perfect. Thank you so much for attending this webinar, and I look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you very much, Rafi. That was a great webinar, and thank you to everyone who attended. We do have more webinars coming up, so please check out our education page on our website at stc.org. And remember, an email is coming your way shortly that will have a link to the recording of today's webinar, as well as a link to an evaluation. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us, and have a great day. Thank you.